Welcome to the session on understanding, setting, and communicating boundaries. Setting good boundaries means making sure we don't waste our energy on things that aren't good for us. It allows us to take charge of our lives and decide what we let in, which helps us become stronger and more resilient, and what we don't let in. Close the gate. Okay. So when setting boundaries, it's important to remember two things. One, boundaries are about how we treat ourselves, not just how others treat us or how we allow others to treat us, but they also help us respond to others' behavior from who we are. Secondly, boundaries should be flexible enough to adapt to different situations while still protecting us from harm. They're not rigid barriers that stop everything. They're not Fort Knox walls, not a jail, but they do keep out things like this fenced gate, to keep out things that aren't good for us. Learning how to set boundaries is a valuable skill that many people can testify to, whether they have it or not. So by the end of the session, you'll learn how to think about, set, and communicate boundaries to improve your relationships with whether that is within yourself, your family, your friends, your coworkers, and your clients. Setting and discussing healthy boundaries can make a big difference in how well those relationships work. Viktor Frankl famously said that man's search is meaning, and his purpose is fulfilling it. Each person's task is unique, and they have a specific opportunity to fulfill it. So let's grab it. This involves taking responsibility for our own life and responding to what life throws at us. Not letting it run over us, but we respond and put our mark on life and not let life roll over us. That is, the pursuit of meaning and purpose defines our individual tasks in life. So as we pursue meaning and purpose, it helps us define our individual tasks in life, how our life looks like. So think of it like starting a new job. If you don't understand your responsibilities, you might not perform well and could disappoint both yourself and others and mess up a bit. This lack of clarity can lead to conflicts and misunderstandings, and it's just not right. Similarly, to have strong relationships, it's important to know where your responsibilities lie, what is yours to own, and what is not yours, but someone else's, okay, outside of your gate. So boundaries are like markers that show where something starts and ends, whether it's a physical area, an idea, or a relationship. Personal boundaries and rules you set to determine how you want others to treat you. It helps you understand what will you tolerate in other people's behaviors and what will you not. They're shaped by your thoughts, feelings, and past experiences. And these boundaries help you express what you're comfortable with and what you're not. And they establish how close others can get to you. You decide, okay? Meaning it's not that we don't get close to people, but we make a choice. So between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And in that gap lies our choice of freedom. It's our freedom to choose who I want to be in any given situation. Also Viktor Frankl. So having healthy boundaries is key to building strong relationships and leading a fulfilling life. Setting and maintaining boundaries is a skill, however. It's beneficial that it is a skill. It's also challenging. What makes it beneficial is that anybody can build a skill. And boundaries is a skill. It's like a muscle. We need to practice it to get stronger with it. It's a challenge because you're not born with it. Nobody is. So everybody needs to grow in it, right? So it can be challenging to establish boundaries because they're invisible, constantly evolving, and unique to each person. But despite the difficulty, they're crucial because they define where you end and where others begin. Think of boundaries in geography as a no trespassing sign. They mark where one area ends and another begins. In relationships, boundaries create necessary spaces for each person to have their own roles, rights, and personal space. It helps you and it allows you to have the space to love yourself and to love others. To be able to love others, but also to be able to love yourself, and not just love others, okay? But to be able to create the space so you can love yourself and therefore love others, okay? Boundaries guide how you communicate, behave, and interact with others. Boundaries create a necessary separation between individuals and demonstrate respect for each other's needs and preferences, and that it is unique. Boundaries can be healthy or unhealthy, depending on why you're setting them. If you're protecting yourself or someone else from harm, it's a healthy-ish boundary. But if you're just pushing people away without reason, it's not beneficial. Guess what? It's not a boundary. It's a coping mechanism. You're closing off. Okay. Don't confuse boundaries with an avoidance coping mechanism. Okay. Boundaries that exclude others or limit opportunities is not constructive, and it is not boundaries. Okay. A boundary serves as the dividing line between your responsibilities and someone else's. Dividing line, where does the heap of their responsibility lie? Where does my responsibility lie? It prevents you from taking on tasks that the other should handle themselves. And furthermore, boundaries prevent you from rescuing someone from the consequences of their own actions. They need to feel it so that they can see the consequences, so they can take up the responsibility next time. Don't take it away from them. Don't do it for them. Don't rescue them, because now they don't learn anything. They don't learn the consequences. Stand out of the way, let them run into the wall. And that's sometimes what people need to know. Oh, I probably shouldn't run like that in that direction. Then I won't get hurt. These experiences that people need to go through to get the consequences are necessary for personal development and growth. Setting boundaries is one of the biggest building blocks of self-respect and inner peace. For instance, for me personally, there was a time when I found myself exhausted from trying to manage things I couldn't control. Other people's moods, opinions, and decisions. If someone was upset, I took it upon myself to fix it. If someone disapproved, I would bend over backwards to help. I felt like I was constantly running in circles, but then I realized something. No matter how much I adjusted myself to keep others happy, it was never enough. Their feelings, their choices, their perceptions, those are never mine to have been trying to control. I cannot control it. And in trying so hard to be everything to everyone, what? I was losing myself. I can pour everything into loving others. I had no space to love myself. That's when I began to understand what boundaries really are. I used to think boundaries were just about portraying how others treat me or controlling how others treat me. And they are, don't get me wrong. We need to teach others who we are by the way we behave. They can't read our mind, so that we ensure people understand what we will and won't tolerate. It's for instance saying, sorry, I don't like those words you used, or I don't agree with that. But I want to help you to understand that it is even more than that. Picture your life as a garden. Your thoughts, your dreams, your choices, they grow in there, in that garden. And it's up to you to nurture them. Are you nurturing them? Are you prioritizing and choosing? Because otherwise nothing's going to happen. Okay? You need to own it and take responsibility of that beautiful garden that you want. So when we're always in someone else's yard, or someone else's garden, trying to fix things, managing situations for others, or trying to convince people so that they can see what you're seeing, you are neglecting your own garden. And you're doing an injustice to their garden because you're doing things for them that they should be doing for themselves. Remember, we are responsible for ourselves and only responsible to others, not for them. Don't take that respect away for themselves. Things that is challenging is worth it. Let them find that it is worth it to walk a tough road for themselves. That breeds respect for themselves. It breeds love for themselves. They are responsible for themselves. And again, not responsible for us. So they are not responsible for how I feel in a situation. They're responsible to how they are behaving in that situation. But I'm responsible for how I feel and then how I react to that. We cannot do more. So setting boundaries isn't about building up walls around ourselves and others. No, it's about stepping out of other people's space and back into our own. And as I realized this, I still sometimes had the urge to correct, to convince or smooth things over for others. And then I came across a simple yet powerful concept, and it was let them. Let them misunderstand. Let them make their own choices. Let them live the life they choose. Because remember, they need to take responsibility for themselves. I cannot. They need to experience it themselves and make their own decisions and feel the consequences. And I need to be responsible for me. So if they find okay to scream and yell and shout, you don't have to. You stand back, you remind yourself that that is what they think is okay. I do not think that is okay. So if you don't think something is okay, you're going to have to behave from that. You're going to have to be somebody that doesn't scream, that doesn't yell back, that doesn't say nasty things. You're going to be the one that says, I have the internal resources available to respond from who I am in this situation. They might not, or they choose to respond differently. That is their responsibility. Let them. And remember, this isn't a stance of, oh, I'll let you, whatever. No. Remember, we're still responsible for ourselves. We can't now think, oh, well, that's your problem. No, because that's then not being responsible for myself, because I'm triggering and I'm doing nothing about it. And I'm not being responsible to others, meaning I'm trying to make it conducive and respectful. Right? So let them means I'm going to allow you to feel what you need to feel, get the consequences what you need so that you can grow by yourself. We need to behave in ways that we want to be known for. So you need to teach other people who you are by the way you behave. People can't read your mind. So if you don't behave in ways that reflect who you are, you won't be known for it. So let your yes be yes and your no be no. At first, letting them misunderstand me felt like I was giving up. But soon I realized that letting them only works when paired with healthy boundaries. It's not about tolerating everything. It's about being intentional with where you invest your energy. That takes deliberate reflection, a prioritization, a pausing, and intentionality on what truly is important to you and what you're wanting to be involved in. Because that is where I need to pour my energy, not in areas that belong to others. That's their niche, that's their yard. Allow them to do their part. Let them be the pear tree and you be the apple tree, okay? Because it's enough for you to figure out what kind of tree you are. And then when you get to figure that out, how to nurture this apple tree so that it can get to its fullest potential. If you struggle with other people's perceptions and judgments, let them believe what they want. If they judge you because they're a pear tree and you're an apple tree, they don't understand how to be an apple tree. You can't control their perceptions. So let yourself stop trying to change their minds. Stop apologizing for who you are. And here's an important part. The moment you let go of the expectation that you can change people and circumstances into what you wish them to be, the more peace you'll have. The moment you stop trying to change others, the more peace you will find. This doesn't mean you give up. It means that regardless of their change or their lack of change, you will still influence. You still show up and you still behave from who you are rather than reacting to how the situation or others make you feel. And this isn't about being passive. It's about finding alignment, living as you want to be known. It's the difference between waiting for others to change and deciding to live right now. You can be you whenever you want to. You have the freedom of that choice. So let them, but more importantly also let yourself. Let yourself own your choices. Decide where you're going to invest your energy. Let yourself take up space. You are worthy. Let yourself be at peace. Let your voice be heard and let it go, regardless of what anyone else does. You cannot change it. And your peace is closer when you let go of the expectation that you're going to change them into what you're wanting before you can find peace. It's not going to happen. Okay. Ultimately, we don't set boundaries to push others away. We set boundaries to define who we are and who we're not, and to help us maintain it and guard it. Guard your heart with all diligence, because from it flows the issues of life. We set them to protect who we are becoming. It is ours. Remember, we need to guard our hearts. Boundaries aren't about restriction. They're about expansion. They allow both the other person and myself to grow. If I'm always mingling in someone else's yard, we won't grow. And if I allow others to always mingle in my yard, we won't grow either. With the garden analogy, for example, if my grass is nice, I can tell my neighbor whose grass isn't so nice where I bought my fertilizer and what I did for my garden to look nice. But I don't have to do it for him. At the end of the day, if he wants a nice garden, he can choose. Okay, I'm going to buy the fertilizer and I'm going to apply it and I'm going to do the hard work. Guess what? If his grass starts looking nice, he'll feel their self-respect and pride, not out of self-righteousness, but out of the simple fact that he did it himself. He'll feel proud of what he's accomplished. And he knows that nobody can take it away from him, that he has done what he did. So we allow people to grow and experience self-respect by putting up boundaries. Not Fort Knox, boundaries with gates. Boundaries create this safe space for us to grow into the person we're meant to be, unburdened by the weight of things that were never ours to carry within our own yard. Close the gate. Don't let the stuff come in. Boundaries establishes responsibility and ownership. Think of it like this. Henry Cloud says that knowing our responsibilities starts with understanding what we can control. And that comes from figuring out who owns what. So if you know who owns something, you know who's in control of that something. And you know then who needs to take responsibility. Similar to have good relationships, whether within ourselves or others, we need to know who's responsible for what. And it's very simple. That person owns themselves. They are in control of themselves. So let them take responsibility for themselves. And the same with you. You are the owner of this person. You are in control of this person. And you need to take responsibility of the good and the bad. So with this picture, there's a messy garden and a neat one. And if your yard is messy, you can complain about not having the resources or the knowledge to make it look nice like the other one. Or you blame other people or situations or circumstances for not being able to have it. And you compare yourself and you feel worthless and ugly and stupid because you don't have a garden like that. Or you take ownership and you can even be inspired by the pretty garden and learn about gardening, ask for help, and you can work toward making it better, step by step, step by step. That's taking responsibility for your life in a nutshell. Just like in the yard example, when I take ownership, I understand what's happening in my life. I know who's responsible for different parts of it. And this helps me master my life. Inside my yard are my feelings, thoughts, beliefs, actions, and dreams, and they are mine to own. No one else is responsible for them. I cannot blame others or circumstances. I need to own them. I need to do the hard work. I need to figure it out. This means I can't blame external things for how I feel or act. I start by recognizing my role in situations, understanding why I feel and think the way I do and why I want to act in a certain way. And then I respond based on who I truly am and not what others make me to be. So setting boundaries is essential for well-being. They involve recognizing your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual limits. Your language and truth help establish these boundaries. What you communicate shows others your values and limits. So boundaries protect what matters while allowing flexibility. They aren't rigid walls, but permeable barriers that keep negativity out while welcoming positive influences. This balance empowers healthier relationships and personal well-being. When boundaries are weak, feelings of resentment and burnout can develop. Clear boundaries enable confident decision-making, prevent overcommitment, and establish what's acceptable for you. So don't work late. Don't just because the company wants me to work 11 hours a day. Don't do it, because eventually, in a few years' time, you burn out, you've lost relationships, then you can't blame the company. They're going to take as much as they can. You need to decide who tolerated it, who said yes to it. Because remember, if we don't say no to something, we say yes to it. Okay. Start saying those no's. Clear boundaries enable confident decision-making, prevent overcommitment, and establish what's acceptable for you. Communicating these limits in relationships demonstrate respect and commitment to want to maintain a strong connection. It shows the person that you respect them. So what falls within our boundaries? Feelings. Feelings play an enormous role in our motivation and behavior. They should neither be ignored nor placed in charge, though. What also falls in our boundaries is attitudes and beliefs. Attitude have to do with your orientation towards something, the stance you take toward others, God, life, work, and relationships. And beliefs are anything that you accept as true. Often we do not see an attitude or belief as the source of discomfort in our life because we want to blame others. But ultimately, we even want to blame our creator. But we need to own our attitudes and convictions because they fall within our property line, right in this garden. We are the ones who feel their effect and the ones who can change them. And then behaviors. It's also in my yard. Behaviors have consequences. You reap what you sow. The problem comes when someone interrupts the law of sowing and reaping in another person's life. They rescue them. To rescue people from the natural consequences of their behavior is to render them powerless. Don't do it. And then choices. Take a responsibility for our own choices, enable us to produce self-control. We often hear others, and sometimes we do too, say, I had to, or she made me. But we need to realize that we are in control of our choices, no matter how we felt, or no matter how tough it is. Making decisions based on others' approval or on guilt breeds resentment. Setting boundaries inevitably involves taking responsibility for your choices. And you are the one who makes them. You are also the one who must live with their consequences. Which of these areas do you find most challenging to take ownership of? Let's continue. What else falls within your boundary? Your values. What we value is what we love and assign importance to. Often we do not take responsibility for what we value. And we could get caught up in valuing the approval of others rather than staying true to our own identity and character. We start living in a rhythm of someone else instead of our own, and we lose ourselves. Another thing in our boundaries is limits. I want to highlight two aspects of limits, namely setting limits on others and setting limits on yourself. So setting limits on others. In reality, setting limits on others is a misnomer. We cannot do that. But what we can do is set limits on our own exposure to people who are behaving poorly. For instance, you can tell somebody, you can be that way if you choose, but please don't come into my house when you are going to behave like that. And then second limit, setting our own internal limits. We need to have spaces inside ourselves where we can be and have feelings and impulses and desires without acting on it, but letting it have space. And then we need self-control without repression. So we don't act upon it, but we allow to think it through. Okay. We're not impulsive, but we're also not repressive. So we need to be able to say no to ourselves. And this includes both our destructive desires and even some good ones. Internal structure is a very important component of boundaries and identity, as well as ownership, responsibility, and self-control. You need to have that internal structure to understand what am I going to do and what am I not. And when you're wanting to do it, to tell yourself that is not what I want to do. If I want to be that person, I cannot do this now. Because if we want to be a certain person, we have to act like it right now. Okay. Other thing that's in our boundaries is our talents and dreams. It's ours. Our talents and dreams are clearly within our boundaries and are our responsibility. Taking ownership of them often is frightening and risky. It takes work, practice, learning, resources, pushing through, and grace to overcome the fear of failure, the difficulty of practicing something when nobody sees, when nobody's looking. Which of these areas would you say you find challenging to own and take responsibility for? And last one, what else falls in my boundaries? It's my thoughts. And there's two aspects around thoughts. We must own our own thoughts. Certainly, we should listen to the thoughts of others and, of course, weigh them. But we should never give our minds over to anyone and just blindly do what they suggest. We are to weigh things for ourselves in the context of ourselves, of who we are, of who we're wanting to be, of the relationship. And we need to sharpen each other as iron, but we need to remain separate thinkers. And that is beautiful, but it takes respect and courage. And then secondly, about thoughts, we must clarify distorted thinking. We need to reframe our distorted thinking because we rarely see people as they really are. Our perceptions are distorted because of past relationships, past negative experiences, and our own perceptions of who we think they are, even the people we know best, are flaunted. So taking ownership of our thinking requires checking out where we may be wrong and taking ownership for this. And secondly, making sure that we are communicating our thoughts and needs well to others. Because we have our own thoughts. And if we want others to know us, and if it's appropriate to share them, we must tell them. Okay. And then lastly, what's in my boundaries, my desires. And that is, if you have a desire, you need to know what that desire is. And you need to be in touch with it. And you need to be able to share it and live to attain it and clean it up. Not all desires are healthy desires. So in reflecting, which of these areas of ownership of thoughts or desires do you think you need to focus on strengthening? Then there are types of boundaries, different types. There's 4. The first one is physical boundaries. People with healthy physical boundaries are aware of appropriate touch in various settings and relationships. For example, when greeting someone new, you likely give them a handshake, and that is acceptable. But we are keenly aware of when someone invades our physical boundaries and go too far. Think about a close speaker, who continues to move towards you after you try to create more space by backing away. Someone can also violate our physical boundaries by going through our phones, our emails, our journals, etc. Okay. Then there's intellectual boundaries. This refers to thoughts and ideas. Healthy intellectual boundaries include respect for others people's ideas and the awareness of appropriate discussion. For instance, when it is appropriate to talk about politics, etc. And then thirdly, emotional boundaries. Healthy emotional boundaries involve knowing when to share or not to share personal information. For example, people with healthy boundaries share personal information gradually as a relationship develops. And someone with loose emotional boundaries might reveal everything to people right away and overwhelm them. Oh my word, I did not have to hear that. Overshare. Okay. And then you get the other one, it's rigid boundaries. They never share their feelings ever, okay, with anybody. It's a little bit of walls, they're distant and aloof. And then fourthly, we have material boundaries, and this refers to money and possessions. Someone with healthy material boundaries will set appropriate limits on what they will share and with whom they will share. For example, you will probably let a family member stay the night at your house, but probably not a stranger to sleep over. Okay. Then there's healthy and unhealthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries means being able to say no when necessary while still maintaining healthy relationships. It involves respecting your own opinions and values, sharing appropriately, and understanding your own desires and needs. Healthy boundaries also involve clear communication and respecting the boundaries of others. Healthy boundaries, thus, is being able to accept somebody else's no. Okay. For example, someone with healthy boundaries can decide not to take on extra tasks at work without feeling guilty or obligated. They're also okay when others decline their requests for help. When somebody else says, no, sorry, I'm also overloaded, I can't help you. It's respecting that. Healthy boundaries allow you to make choices based on your own capacity and willingness rather than seeking approval or admiration from others. So healthy boundaries allow an individual to have high self-esteem and self-respect, to share personal information gradually in a mutually sharing and trusting relationship, to protect physical and emotional space from intrusion. It allows you to have an equal partnership where responsibility and power are shared. There's no power games, okay? We're equal, responsible for and to each other. And then being assertive. Healthy boundaries allows us to be assertive, confidently and truthfully to be able to say yes or no and be okay when others also say no to you. Boundaries helps us to separate your needs, thoughts, feelings, and desires from others. It's not theirs to blame. Recognize that your boundaries and needs are different from others. And lastly, boundaries allows you to empower yourself to make healthy choices and take responsibility for yourself. As Gerard Manley Hopkins said, your personal boundaries protect the inner core of your identity and your right to choices. And then Brené Brown also said, compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and when they say yes, they mean it. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. Then unhealthy boundaries. You get rigid or loose boundaries, which are both unhealthy. Rigid. People with rigid boundaries keep their distance emotionally or physically from others, avoiding closeness. They tend to keep personal information private and rarely ask for help. This behavior may make them appear distant as they try to avoid the possibility of rejection. So it's actually a coping mechanism, and therefore actually not, that's why it's not a healthy boundary. It's a coping mechanism for protecting mechanism for not getting hurt. Okay? They might have gotten hurt and now they protect them, close themselves off. An example might be someone with rigid boundaries might consistently decline extra tasks at work, isolating themselves and potentially feeling disconnected from the team and their job. And then we have another unhealthy boundary, which is loose boundaries. Individuals with loose boundaries tend to overshare personal information. They struggle to say no, oh, I need to do, yes, I'll help you, and become overly involved in other people's problems. Okay, they rely heavily on the opinions of others and what others have to say about them, and get very upset as to what others say about them because they are attached to what others say, because they are not listening to who they are, and they also tolerate disrespect because they want to avoid rejection. An example of loose boundaries. A person with loose boundaries might frequently agree to requests that they shouldn't be agreeing with. They feel guilty about saying no, which they must rather relate to, this is what I want, this is what that person needs to do for themselves. And they potentially subject themselves to abuse by allowing others to take advantage of them. Unhealthy boundaries are characterized by, so you can see unhealthy boundaries by people sharing too much too soon. Or on the other spectrum, closing yourself off and not expressing your needs and wants at all. Another sign is feeling responsible for other people's happiness. a weak sense of your own identity, basing how you feel about yourself on how others treat you. So you define yourself by how others talk to you or behave to you towards you. And you allow others to make decisions for you. And consequently, you feel powerless and do not take responsibility for your own life. And then you want to blame because you feel like a victim. Okay? You need to take ownership, okay? So as a reflection, think about a recent situation where you have set a boundary or you wish you had set one. And reflect on whether your boundary in that situation were healthy or unhealthy. And what the outcome was. How did it make you feel? So take a few moments to reflect on your experience, considering both healthy and unhealthy boundary behaviors. And then you can write down, what boundary did you set or wish you had set? Was it healthy or unhealthy? And how did that affect the experience and the outcome and your well-being and the relationship? Okay. You can also see this activity in the notes. Let's continue. So why do boundaries break down? There are several factors that can contribute to the breakdown of boundaries or the unkept maintenance of boundaries, or even the fear of starting to set them in the first place. And that is the fear of rejection. And this stems from seeking validation from others, which can result in saying yes to please others and avoid the pain of rejection. So not setting boundaries. The second is the fear of conflict. Avoiding disagreements or confrontations can lead to blurred boundaries, as individuals may suppress their own needs to just maintain the peace. So somebody else is just doing what they want and you don't ever say something because you want to avoid disagreement or confrontation. And you build resentment because this person just continues on with something you don't like, but you don't tell them so they don't know. And some people are genuinely just unaware and others are going to exploit it. Okay? If you don't say no, I'm going to use it. Right. And thirdly, the fear of appearing selfish. And that's often also a very popular one. Some people hesitate to assert themselves out of a concern that they may come across as self-centered or inconsiderate. Okay? But respectful assertion of boundaries is actually the most respectful thing you can do, because you are saying, you know what, this is how I see it, but I'm interested in how you are seeing it. So how can we do this moving forward, respecting both? It's the most respectful thing, actually. And then another reason for breaking down of boundaries is the fear of losing relationship. This is also a popular one. Boundary violations might occur when individuals are afraid that setting limits could jeopardize their connections with others. And quite frankly, you know, if there's somebody that can't respect your no, or can't hear your opinion and consistently dismiss you, perhaps that relationship needs a pause or even an ending. Fifth, fear of being judged. The fear of negative judgment from others can make people reluctant to assert their boundaries, causing them to compromise on their needs. And that fear of being judged just needs a journey in reframing from your hurtful past, wounded self-talk, from I'm not good enough and therefore I need to do X, Y, and Z, and then I will, you know, not be judged, or I will be liked or loved, or I get the belonging and the acceptance I want, to reframing it to I am worthy and I love this myself exactly how I am, and I'm going to behave from that into these situations and live for that and going forward to that, regardless of how they choose to behave or live their own life and how they judge me, regardless of how they judge me. It's not up to them. Okay. And then sixth, last one, the reason for not setting boundaries is the fear of the unknown. It's scary. Uncertainty about the outcomes of boundary setting can also lead to boundaries breaking down or not being set in the first place. And again, that fear of the unknown is a journey of courage. Okay? And again, you want to believe in yourself and know why you're doing something in order to be able to do it, to have the courage to move forward and do it, and know what you're losing if you don't do it. Okay, so reflect on that. What are you missing out on if you don't take the courage and do and face the unknown, and understand what it is that you want and what you're not going to get if you don't face the unknown and do. Okay? So think about a time you hesitated to set a boundary, or when you allowed a boundary to break down. Which fear influenced you the most, if you look at this list? And how did it affect your decision? Now, moving forward, what small steps can you take to build confidence in overcoming this fear and setting boundaries, even when they will arise? Okay, take some time. This question is also in your notes. And then something that's very connected to this, it's more the almost, I want to say, professional way of looking at ignored or unestablished boundaries, the signs thereof, and that is codependence. If there is unestablished boundaries, and people are relying entirely on others for approval and support, it's codependence, and it's usually the victims and the rescuers that becomes codependent. Right? They both need each other to feel worthy, but guess what? They both are actually worthy by themselves. They must figure it out. They must realize it on a journey. The second sign of ignored or unestablished boundaries is conflict avoidance. Ignoring problems in the hope that they'll go away on their own. Fear of conflict or difficult conversations. And then victim mentality, feeling powerless and helpless in situations. And then again, that is due to past negative experiences that one needs to heal. And then being distant, being overly independent or avoiding openness because of past experiences, hurts, and boundaries being violated. So now people rather just build prisons and Fort Knox walls, being distant. And then if somebody comes too close or hurt you again, you clap it too. Okay, you close too soon, and you shun them away, and not allowing everyone to grow. You just say, "Oh no, I'm not going to be your friend anymore." Instead, okay, let's talk about it. This hurt me. What did you mean, really? Okay. And then allowing both to grow, not just being distant and closing up yourself. And then lastly, invisibility, avoiding attention. It's a coping mechanism to protect oneself from the potential of upset or hurt that feels overwhelming. They can't handle it. They can't handle people's interaction or opinions or judgments. They're so raw and sensitive that they just want to be invisible. They just do their thing and leave. It's brokenness, right? And that can be healed. So when you decide to set boundaries, you might encounter pushback. People might test your limits or react negatively to the changes. But remember, this doesn't mean you're in the wrong. It's about being clear and consistent until others adapt to the new way of interacting. Remember, you have become the unknown or the different when you start behaving differently. And it's a natural inclination of the human being to dislike or be skeptical about something that's different or unknown. So if you're going to change your behavior and start saying no and behave in different ways, people will react. And you just have to be consistent in continuously behaving like that, saying no, behaving in your ways that's honoring. Right? Can you recognize a sign, any of these signs in yourself or people that you love? So here's an activity. And this is also in your notes. You can go and unpack it in your notes. It's identifying your needed boundaries. So first up, think about personal needs. What are things you feel you have the right to ask for in your relationships or a work environment? For instance, I have the right to ask for privacy in my personal space, or to have all the details before being expected to make a decision. Secondly, consider how you can take care of your time and energy. What actions can you take to protect your time and energy from being drained or misused? So, for example, to protect my time and energy, it's okay to change my plans if necessary and say no to something, not attend something, or to set limits on the amount of time I spend on a task or with somebody. To set limits on it, to say, okay, I need to go home now. And then thirdly, think about behaviors or actions you want to prevent from others, things you don't want them to behave towards you. What are things that people may not do to you? For example, people may not humiliate me in front of others or invade my personal belongings without permission. So as a reflection, where do you need more boundaries in your life? What's one step you can take today to begin setting those boundaries?